All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Tuesday and delighted to be speaking directly to Arlen Grossman, California's thought leader. Hey, Arlen, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. I mean, I'm looking outside the window and it's kind of moderate, overcast, cool outside. But I understand a lot of the country is just sweltering and people are having a tough time. You said yourself it's like 100 degrees there in Maryland. And I don't know if that's normal or not. But anyway, the climate certainly is a problem. And of course, the news is happening so fast, I can't keep up with it now. It just changes every half hour. We don't know if there's a ceasefire, if it's still holding, if it'll be there in in an hour or two. So yeah, a lot going on.
100% on everything you just said, Arlen. And yeah, pretty close, if not quite triple digits here in suburban Washington, D.C. And we do see days like this, but obviously they're more frequent than in the past. And the heat waves are longer. And I think there have been some articles about that, just how brutal these heat waves are. You mentioned, deaths from heat prostration and simply exposure to the elements as a result of this kind of climate.
And I wonder if the federal government has the ability to, tackle all this heat and problems in temperature, because so much of it was gutted. FEMA was gutted. And so I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's always worrisome when we see this kind of downsizing of the institutions that we rely on to keep people alive, to protect safety and the like. And obviously, that's one of the worst features, and there are many bad ones, of this particular administration. And I would say of Republican administrations in general. Certainly, Ronald Reagan, who is now, I guess, touted as somewhat of a moderate, was responsible for a significant amount of the downsizing we've seen, the inability of government to perform basic functions because of those massive tax cuts, unprecedented still, that he effectuated back in the early 80s.
Hal, did you see my friend Nicholas Kristof's latest column? He was talking about he's going through Africa, seeing the results of all these cuts from, U.S. aid or whatever, and, documenting the thousands of people, kids that are dying because we've stopped, treatment for them, because we've stopped research. And it's having a significant effect on lots of people, but the administration will not talk about that. Marco Rubio says, "Oh, nobody's going to die under my watch," but it's happening, and he's seeing it and documenting it, and we'll see what happens with that.
Arlen, I was listening to, as is often my want now that we have internet everywhere, we're completely wired or wireless. I can listen to the New York City classical music station WQXR. So I hear the New York news. And one thing that really struck me is with the heat wave there. I was in the city, by the way, over the weekend. I mentioned I was campaigning for Zohran Mamdani. Go Mamdani. Today is election day in New York. If you want to make a difference, that's the most important thing you can do, I believe, is vote for progressives, true progressives, people who will take on the elites in both parties. And that does certainly appear to be Zohran Mamdani, which explains why the New York Times, for example, appears so afraid of him, as do many other of the billionaire class in that city. But it was very hot. It was very oppressive. It wasn't as bad as it is now. Arlen, as I'm listening to QXR yesterday, what I heard was the report that folks who don't have air conditioning, there's still many apartments in New York City that don't have air conditioning, or it's not very powerful. One place they can go for relief is the public libraries. So again, a government institution, the library, providing a crucial function.
And we know the cause of all that is climate change, which the Trump administration doesn't even want to talk about or think about, and disregarded by all the Republicans. So we're not doing anything about that. So it's probably going to continue and get worse.
To be fair, Arlen, we didn't really do much about it under the Biden administration either.
Well, we did a little more, and the Republicans blocked any chance of getting more help in that area.
Well, Biden did approve more oil leases even than Trump did during his first 4 years in office. So it's a bipartisan problem.
Okay, I'll accept that.
The climate catastrophe is a bipartisan existential threat. Another bipartisan existential threat, really, it is existential. It's happening right now. Is the genocide in Gaza. According to WAFA, again, the Palestinian news agency, Arlen, we have a death toll now reaching 56,077. That's the certain number. That includes 79 killed yesterday. So it just doesn't end. I know the situation in Iran was really bad because of what the Israelis did there just over the past week or so. And of course, Trump joined the killing a little bit. I don't know if the American raids killed anybody, but we did attack 3 nuclear facilities there. Hopefully there is a truce at this point. But just let me get this little slide out. So again, 79 people through yesterday, actually, or were killed yesterday. And we have close to 6,000 dead since Trump took office, including probably 3,000 or so, maybe more, women and children. So just another awful day. Do you think that people are just, sort of given numb to it, Arlen? I mean, because I bring this up every day. I know some people really appreciate my doing that, but my sense is that the numbers are at a point now, and it's just so consistent, it's rote, that people are numb to the slaughter there.
I think you're absolutely right about that. What's going on is just horrible, and if you lived in that area, you'd be under threat of being killed almost every minute of the day. But yeah, you don't hear anything from the Trump administration about that. They pretty much have ignored it, and then really there's nothing going on that appears to have any chance of changing the way things are right now.
It's really, really, really awful, Arlen. All right, let's go to Iran. Shaky, because I could talk about Palestine every day. I do focus on it quite a bit, but I'm never going to not mention it. But we have many other stories we really have to discuss, and obviously the situation in Iran. This is from earlier today, Arlen. You can look at that current time when this was posted. It wasn't 2 minutes ago. It was maybe an hour or so ago. 6:41 p.m. I believe it's 8 hours later, maybe 7 hours later in Jerusalem. So that would mean it would have been about 11:41 East Coast time. So a little over 2 hours ago, this was posted. What's your sense? And I know, I'm not trying to be pejorative or critical of you. You're not a Trump liker. You are a Trump very, very strong disliker, if not a Trump hater. So with that in mind, what is your sense of how Trump is handling the situation between Israel and Iran, and the U.S. too, by the way?
From what I heard him talking about this morning, I think he's having a hell of a time, containing himself. He's really flustered. He's using a lot of swear words. He even said that peace through strength was something that he made up. So, all these kind of crazy things that he says, people just accept and go on. And, what's going to happen here, I don't know. He wants that peace to hold, that truce to hold, and then maybe he could get the Nobel Peace Prize, which I think is one of his goals. But it's so shaky there. We just don't know if it's going to hold or not. And there's also reports that Iran may have taken some of their nuclear material and put it elsewhere prior to the launch of the U.S. Missiles in those 3 places. So, nobody's quite sure if we really have gotten rid of Iran's nuclear possibilities.
Well, you mentioned the obscenities, and I understand Trump was cursing out Netanyahu and perhaps as well the president of Iran or the supreme leader of Iran. He's apparently, by all accounts, extremely frustrated, extremely irritated with the Israeli prime minister, which I think most of us share that feeling. And I'm hoping that it translates into a withdrawal of support. But he has been apparently more aggressive in his posturing towards Netanyahu. What do you Do you think that Trump did the right thing? And I was very critical of his attack on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. I think it was absolutely the wrong thing to do. I understand why he did it, but I'm wondering what your reaction to that decision was.
I think most of the American people did not want it. I saw a poll that they didn't think we should be invading Iran. And, Trump from the very beginning has said, I'm not going to get into any wars. The success of my administration will be the wars we don't get into. But, he's all the way into this one. He's, deciding that he has the answer. And I think he's very frustrated and unpredictable. He was also cussing out CNN and MSNBC because they didn't go along with what he was talking about. So a lot is up in the air. I think he's unstable. We'll see. But I, his mental capacity.
I mean, I assume, let me just jump in. I assume, though, you are pleased at least that he is talking peace and urging Netanyahu to not retaliate, not to step up the attacks. That's better than the converse. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I know he wants to see peace. It'll help, make him look better. So, but it's of course really tough to keep peace in that area, that region of the world, as you know.
Yeah, and also, and I really hate to make excuses for Trump. He is the president. He's the commander in chief. He makes the decisions. But I do think there's been quite a lot of pressure on him from Democrats and Republicans to show support for Israel, meaningful support by attacking Iran, which he did. I think much to his discredit, should not have done it. But this is a situation where the military-industrial complex, if you will, is exerting a lot of pressure on the White House to engage militarily.
It seems that Trump is keeping very close contact with Netanyahu. I think they're sort of on the same page, and he's hoping they'll go along with whatever he says. But I don't know exactly how that's going. We'll see.
All right. Israel has suffered some casualties. Israel has been basically the exponent of violence. It has not received anywhere near as much as it's doled out, as it's knocked out. But still, Iran did injure 21 Israelis just in the past couple of days in response to the attack by Israel, the ongoing attacks. And there have been fatalities as well. I did some research on this. I wanted to see what's happening in Israel. So you can see Israeli officials say that the Iranian response to the Israeli attacks led to 24 Israelis killed, in contrast to the 722 people that Israel killed. So again, very disproportionate. Israel causing far more damage. Israel launching the war, causing Iran to respond. So Israel, the government, certainly the country, bears the responsibility for all the deaths, in my opinion. But I have a question for you, Arlen, and I don't know if I did share with you an article about Israel's blind spot and how the Israeli people don't seem to have much, if any, empathy for the Palestinians, whom they are keeping in an open-air concentration camp or now a death camp. How should we feel about is there any specific way we should feel about the Israeli deaths? I mean, these are presumably, I don't want to say innocent exactly, but they're not necessarily the people who are responsible for the treatment of the Palestinians or for launching the war. So how should we feel about these victims?
Well, I think the 24 people killed there might have been a surprise because in the prior Iranian raids, if I recall, I don't think anybody died. They were able to, stop a lot of the missiles, and they stopped a lot of the missiles this time, but not all of them, obviously. And some of them got through and civilians were killed. So, that's going to maybe change things. I don't know. There's no excuse for letting what's going on in Gaza continue because it's just inhumane. And, the whole world should be doing something about it. If we had a UN that used to be as strong as it was, the UN would step in. But I don't think the UN has any power at all right now.
I mean, how would you? I mean, this is a kind of an odd question, but I've heard that I haven't expressed enough sympathy for the Israeli victims of the wars that Israel launches, and I mean, I have sympathy for all people who are killed or who are hurt, of course, But I'll be honest with you, it is tough for me to gin up a lot of concern. One reason is they have universal military conscription in Israel, unless you're ultra-Orthodox. So the people who are killed, unless they're kids, were almost certainly in the Israeli military. So they are in some way somewhat responsible for oppressing Palestinians. And there does not appear to be much sympathy, if any, for the Gazans. That said, I mean, these are lives. It's still terrible. It's still something that we have to lament.
Unfortunately, what I've been reading is that the Israelis are more concerned about the hostages that Iran still holds. And, there's a number of them, but not all that many, but compared to the thousands that are in Gaza and the civilians who are being killed. So I don't think that's right. I think there's too much emphasis on the hostages when there should be emphasis on everybody's lives.
Yeah, there's no question. I think the hostages are the families of the hostages being held in Gaza, those who may still be alive, are begging Netanyahu to stop attacking Iran and to focus on the release, which is how you can get them released if you focus on peace. But that's just not clearly his priority in any way. But that's why we would want a U.S. president who cares about peace, who cares about human life. And I don't see that we have that now, not that we had it before either. Trump, though, again, is trying to keep the hostilities to a simmer and to end between Iran and Israel. We'll see how much success he has. As you pointed out, a good point, Arlen, it changes minute by minute. Yesterday, my son said to me during the evening, he said, there's a ceasefire. And then he said, Israel just attacked Iran. So,
yeah, it's going to change. It's going to go back and forth, I suspect. I don't think anything is permanent right now. We'll just have to wait and see and figure out what we're going to, how we're going to react to what's going on at any particular time. But I don't think Trump is getting what he wants. He wants total peace, everybody liking each other and no chance of further wars. But I don't know if he's going to get that. Probably.
Well, I would like that too. And I think the way you get there is you have to be far, far more aggressive with Israel and far more clear that you're not going to support them. And there was a little bit of threat early on by Witkoff when he first met with Netanyahu. And it did lead to some sustained, to a relatively long ceasefire of several weeks. All right, don't forget, click subscribe, do that. We're seeing a bump in the numbers. We love seeing that. Call in if you want to join us, 240-242-5646. I actually am monitoring the YouTube chat. Not seeing anyone. We had a lot of chatters yesterday, a lot of chatterboxes. Nothing much today. Not sure what changed, but there it is. Arlen, I put up this headline here for you. You recommended this piece. I didn't see it. I wasn't aware of it. You mentioned, I think, Nick Kristof earlier. I didn't read. I read a lot of the stuff in the times when you recommend it to me, and sometimes unsolicited. But usually I'm reading to be honest with you, mainly the news stories, sometimes the opinion page, not the op-ed writers, but the actual editorial page itself. So I didn't read this piece until you recommended it. I liked it. But you tell me why Tressie McMillan Cottom's, not Cotton, Cottom's article there, Obama isn't going to save you. Why did that speak to you? How did that speak to you?
Yeah, I don't really know her, but she apparently writes a lot in the New York Times, and I like what I've seen so far. And this particular column, she was Obama isn't going to save you. She says, all this to say that a president benefited a lot from a media world in which we shared the same reality. Obviously, that doesn't happen anymore. There's more than one reality. And Obama's not going to have the same influence that he did back then when everybody pretty much had the same idea about reality. And it looks like
Well, she talks about, let me just bring up a few points and then you can look at your notes if you like. But she does speak quite a bit about the changed media environment. She argues that Obama's popularity in part stemmed from the fact that there was some consistency in terms of what we all viewed. The TV speeches on TV would get 50 million people or more watching. So Obama had big numbers, big audience numbers. He was a good speaker. So he benefited from that. And, there are a lot of things about Obama. He has a certain level of charisma. I agree with that. There's a lot here. I want to draw your attention to a few points here.
Okay.
Well, first of all, she says, Cottom says, that the idea that Obama is a savior of the party, she said she understands it, but she says it's absolute madness.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, that is she really just shoots this down completely. And I was a little bit surprised by that statement. But why do you think she says that, or why does she say that?
For one thing, if you compare Obama to Trump, Obama would give great speeches. His administration would be scandal-free. And, in so many ways, he's so much better than Trump is now. And it seemed like a very intelligent man who knew what he was doing. But now we have a totally different situation in which Trump doesn't seem to know what he's doing, but he has a lot of people thinking he knows what he's doing, and they're supporting him. But it's a different environment, and anything that Obama would say or do would be knocked down and criticized by all the MAGA sources. So he wouldn't have a chance.
Well, she also makes the point that while Obama did speak well, that he was a powerful orator, his policies were, pretty meh. They were pretty much right down the middle, centrist. She said they weren't really that different from Reagan's, which makes sense since he expressed quite a bit of admiration for Reagan, even when he was first running for president in 2008. So she said that's a problem. She suggests, as I often do, and I was wondering, again, if you had sort of seen shades of Hal in the writing, because Cottom makes the point that what the left really needs, meaning the Democrat Party, I suppose when she says the left, is a coherent, consistent ideology.
Yeah, Obama is definitely very moderate. Of course, he was going up against, tough opposition. We're not going to allow him to get health care. We're not going to allow him to do many of the things he would like to do. So he did the best he could, I think, maybe not good enough. He should have been a little bit stronger, a little bit more progressive. And there are some progressive candidates right now, like OAC and, a few others, but they're not getting much play in the media. So at this point,
AOC got a lot of media attention when she was touring the country on her Fight Oligarchy tour.
But everything now, if you go on the news, it's Trump, 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 Trump. And, every once in a while you'll hear a few things about Democrats, but pretty rarely in comparison, I think.
Yeah, President has a very, very big bully pulpit. There's no question about it. And Trump is he sells floor wax, so you get that without question. Here's what Cottom says, very kind of consistent with what you were pointing out earlier. And she says, how could he be the leader? He's term limited out. He can't run he certainly can't run for president again. He hasn't really been in the media much, which is to his discredit. I think he should have been speaking out much more about, but to me, he should be speaking out about what the Democratic Party needs to do to make life better for the American people. But she does say, as you did, that the media environments of 25 and 2009 are so different that they should be barely considered the same species. You were mentioning, Arlen, during the break, the media environment even going back 50, 60 years ago to the 60s and 70s, when really we had three major networks. And Walter Cronkite, he might have had an audience of 75, 80, 100 million people at some point as the number one newscaster, the number one anchor in America. Even in 2009, when I was operating the radio station, you remember that, of course, in Monterey, the market, it was fragmented, but there was still a center. Radio still commanded a decent audience, a decent percentage of listeners on radio. There was certainly cable TV, which had eroded greatly the big three's audience, but there wasn't all the podcasting, all the various options that you now have on YouTube. So we've really just seen a remarkable evolution or even revolution in media. And
Yeah.
you think that's bad, right? You think that on balance is a real problem.
Oh, it's terrible. Absolutely. Because we're just so divided as a country, and one side thinks the other side is crazy, and the other side thinks, the other side is crazy. And, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And it seems like, one thing I noticed, I was looking at their TV ratings for MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News. Fox News has like 3 or 4 times the numbers that CNN and MSNBC have. So there's a lot of money going into Fox News and copycats like Fox News, and I think people are making money off, siding with Trump and criticizing anybody on the left or any Democrats. And I think the Democrats are in a weaker position right now, media-wise. So, and that's part of the problem right now.
Well, you've said that before, and I'm a little less clear on that, Arlen. For example, the most important newspaper by far in the country is the New York Times, and that's a pro-democratic, not a lefty, not a progressive, but certainly a pro-democratic organ. It's certainly a Trump-phobic organ. I believe the radio shows that get the radio talk shows that get by far the biggest audiences are NPR. And their politics are pretty indistinguishable. That's the word I was looking for, struggling for that. NPR and New York Times' editorial views are pretty indistinguishable from each other. It is true that you have a bunch of loudmouth demagogues like Mark Levin and Hannity and people like that on the right, but I think their audience is much smaller than it was, 20 years ago when I started the radio station in Monterey. So I don't think the media landscape is quite as skewed to the right as you do.
Yeah, well, how many people actually read the New York Times? Or, I'd say a very small percentage of the population. Newspapers are just going downhill and nobody pays a lot of attention to them. But, so what's happening is social media. You got the Joe Rogan program that has millions of people listening to it, and lots of other right-wing broadcasts.
But he's not right-wing, Arlen. He's really not. I mean, she talks about Joe Rogan, too, here. She says the problem on the left is they don't want a political faith, which is what I've said over and over. They don't want to be consistently progressive, to have this is what it means to be a leftist, a progressive. You are for Medicare for all. You're for peace. You're for much higher tax on the wealthy. You're for fair trade, not free trade. But Democrats don't want that. They just want a charismatic preacher like an Obama who will draw people in without providing a truly progressive message. I think she's spot on. And she makes a good point about Rogan. I think Rogan's terrible. I agree with this. I don't think he's good at all. I've watched his program now and then I can watch for 5 minutes. With all due humility, I think I'm a much better communicator than he is, with a much more consistent message, much more persuasive. But I have a tiny little minuscule audience and his is enormous. So it's not, I don't see him as some sort of a giant slayer or even a giant. He's just, like she says, a white noise machine. He's not really moving people in any direction, I don't think.
She mentioned something about Spotify putting a lot of clout, a lot of money into his program and making him more popular. And, wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of money in criticizing Democrats and promoting Trump. And,
I don't think he does that, Arlen. Have you watched his program? I just don't think that's what Rogan does.
No, my impression from what people have said is that he's more helpful to Trump than he is to the Democrats. But I actually don't.
Well, he did, I guess. I don't think he endorsed anybody. He had endorsed Bernie in 2020. He supported Bernie. Yeah. But he's kind of not really particularly partisan, or certainly not. His politics are just, they're middle of the road. I don't think he's not a real political animal, in my opinion.
Okay, I really don't know that much about him, so I won't say any more. But I think, the amount of right-wing MAGA news sources out there, I think, is bigger than you might think. Fox News is one TV channel, and then you've got Newsmax. They try to imitate Fox. You got One America News, and they're trying to imitate Fox News. And the Democrats just don't have any kind of a media that seems to draw the attention that it does, that the right wing ones do, at least as far as I can see.
Well, I agree with you there. I mean, I totally agree with you that the networks, right? Not the individuals like Rogan, but those networks, One America News, Fox, they're very scary. They're extremist. And that is the case. But one reason they're able to be successful is they have big audiences. I mean, people actually tune in. No one, for example, is watching CNN.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like I said, the ratings with CNN and MSNBC are just a fraction of what Fox News gets. Fox News has figured out this is what people want. People want a pro-Trump network and believe that. I think what they allow right-wingers to do is feel okay about the fact that they're a little bit racist, they're a little bit prejudiced, and I think a lot of that appeals to a lot of people, and so we've got what we've got now.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that the problem that you have is there is that element to a degree, but I think you also have the element where the so-called liberal or left-leaning media, or whatever you want to call it, the New York Times and others, CNN, they really don't offer anything to anyone, and they tend to be extremely corporate. They're advertised. They have big pharma ads. They have these sponsorships from the oil and gas concerns, from military contractors. So they're not speaking for workers. They're not on the side of blue collar America either.
Yeah, almost any kind of media we have now, it's going to be corporate owned or MAGA owned, and the progressive wing of the party doesn't really have any one thing that people could look to. There's a few websites maybe, but beyond. But the big stuff, the corporate media is putting a lot of money into it, and people are making a lot of money by being pro-Trump and anti-Biden and anti-democratic. So the media landscape is not good right now.
I just wanted to put this quote up from Rogan, and then we'll get on to some other stories that you wanted to discuss. And I think this was a good story about Obama. So this is what Rogan said to Newsweek just recently. He said there are a lot of viewpoints about Republicans, and I think this is consistent with his podcasts to the extent I've seen them. He's really not strong towards either party, for either party. He says there's a lot, they make a lot of sense to him. See, to me, almost nothing in either party makes sense, in terms of good policy. It does make sense for the people in the party. It makes them money, but it's not good for us. I'm a human being. There's a lot of things that the Dems believe that I believe. There's a lot of things that they say that I say that makes a lot of sense to me. And a lot of things the Republicans say that makes a lot of sense to me. And the idea that I have to ignore things that make sense to me because it's coming from the wrong team is just stupid, he said. So I think that is kind of true in terms of he's describing his views and how he presents. And I think that's why he's so popular, because Americans don't like the hyperpartisanship. They want somebody who's going to be willing to see some good, some decency in both sides, and also be very critical when they don't.
Yeah, I think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are not very popular right now. I think people would love to see a third party, some alternate to what we have now. The Republican Party is really not even a party anymore. That's all Trump all the time. And, they do whatever and think whatever he says and does. So, that's off the table. But they have they have all the power. They have the majorities in Congress and everything. The Democratic Party has no power anywhere. And, they have a very poor reputation. You look at the polls now, and people don't think much of the Democratic Party. And after the last election, that's understandable. So, I think the American people are looking for alternatives somewhere, but they haven't found it yet.
Well, I'm hoping they find one alternative in New York City today and nominate Zoran Mamdani to be the Democratic candidate for mayor, because I think that's the solution. That's what we have to do, is we have to vote for good, strong progressives who will actually redistribute wealth and power down and will stand up against the the warmongers. And that's what Mamdani will do, or at least I hope he will. He says he will. Maybe he won't. Maybe he's just all, maybe he'll be another Obama who says the right things and doesn't do them. That's obviously the fear, but it could happen. Here's what Cottom says. Just want to go with a little more, Arlen. She's saying, hey, the reason Democrats are unpopular is because congressional Dems are not effectively reflecting voters' anger and despondency. I think that's exactly right. There we are, the minority party defense is wearing thin. And then she says the real vacuum is not in Congress or in the White House. She says it's in the street. She wants people to get out there and, I guess, shut everything down. Do you agree with that recipe?
I was very feeling really good about that protest we had about a week ago. It turned out to be maybe, one of the largest protests in one day in American history. So there was a lot of people that feel very strongly that they don't like what's going on with Trump and the things that are going on in Washington, D.C. But, where do they go? They have to, we have to figure out a way to get all that support to get together and make some strategies that'll change things. But right now they have no power except that they are noticed. There's a lot of people who don't like what's going on.
Well, given that fact, given that Cottom says, hey, the Democratic Party in Congress certainly isn't effectively reflecting the rage of the people, why is there a complete unwillingness to even discuss building up an alternative to the Democratic Party? Why isn't that mentioned in this article? Why wasn't that part of the protest in Monterey? It seems to me so clearly the right answer.
Well, that might be the answer, or it could be the Democratic Party could change quite a bit and become very progressive, and because they're established and they have more of a chance than a third party would. But if they're going to,
okay, for the sake of this conversation, I'll give you that, but I think the problem we've seen is that the Democratic Party is simply completely resistant to any change. But even assuming that's correct, what you said, then why doesn't Cottom say in this piece, hey, we've got to convert the Democratic Party, we've got to reform the party, and one way to start is to vote for Zoran Mamdani in New York City. Because even if you believe that the Democratic Party can be the vehicle that drives us to a better place, why in this piece? I don't know. I'm not trying to be difficult. I really don't understand the idea that people are going to protest in the streets is going to bring about change, positive change. I think it's pretty naive. It's not like we've seen that. We saw the Arab Spring in Egypt, and there's a repressive regime in Egypt. We have not seen protests lead to better outcomes in general.
Yeah, you're right. There's not one thing that's going to happen just because a lot of people get together, but at least it shows that not everybody is falling in line with Trump and, believes all the MAGA things that he talks about. So the trouble is there's not going to be another presidential election until 2028. So there's time for people to take a different tack than the Democrats have been having for so long, and maybe not depend so much on corporate support. And I'm hoping, there'll be some people that will stand out. Gavin Newsom seems to, really be one of those people that wants to. I don't know if he's, has the ability to do that, but and there's probably going to be a few others that'll come up and hopefully capture the people's attention and provide a different viewpoint for the Democratic Party.
Well, we can always hope. California's thought leader, Arlen Grossman, with us. And don't forget, I already told you to subscribe now. We really want you to do that. I'm also going to say, hey, if you haven't yet, join Halitics on Facebook. We love the back and forth. We love the ferment of ideas. The one thing I don't allow is the insulting. We try to keep it a relatively safe place for people. So if you are mean, I kick you out, but otherwise you get to stay. And I think that's actually makes it more attractive for many people. Also, do click, if you get a chance, please click that like button. That also helps us with the algorithm. And yeah, comment, any comment. Every person say commenting, any comment is better than none. So if you want to just say how you suck, do that rather than just moving on. Before you move on, say how you suck.
Yeah, and I see a phone number there, 240-242-5646. So if anybody has a disagreement or agreement with any of us, they can certainly call. We don't get too many calls, but I'd like to see more.
It would be really nice, Arlen. I agree with you. And, yesterday, though, we had a lot of people in the chat. They're all abandoned me. Yesterday, I went at 3. Maybe I need a different time, but this is the time I do. Well, I do 2 for you, but normally noon is best. And that's when we're going to keep it. And you can always watch me on replay. So you mentioned you like Tressie McMillan Cottom. That's a hard name for me. Tressie McMillan Cottom, I guess. She has another piece here you recommended, Arlen. This is from just 2 days ago. Political violence is here and it's working. So why did this article speak to you? What is the message that you take away from it?
Well, because we're seeing more and more political violence and threats of violence. We had those candidates in Minnesota that one candidate and her husband killed. And that actually, I was reading something that it's very close in the Senate there, and with her gone, then the Democrats might even have lost their majority. So will the Republicans take advantage of that? I don't know, but the Democrats have to certainly watch that, because the Republicans will do anything to get more power. But there's been a lot more threats of violence. People are afraid to speak up. Because they're going to get challenged and berated on social media. It's tough to come up with a strong progressive opinion, because it's going to be attacked, and you might have your address shown and your phone number shown, and so it's kind of scary in a way, and it may be pushing down the amount of discourse in this country, just because people are afraid of what other people will do who don't agree with them.
Well, that is Cottom's point. She says that some Republicans are afraid to speak out against Trump for fear of death threats or for fear of getting targeted. She brings up the case of Nancy Pelosi's husband getting attacked in his home with a claw hammer. I wouldn't say these are really progressives, though. These aren't people who are out on the hustings fighting for workers. So I take her point. Obviously, we decry any kind of political violence. No, she doesn't mention that Trump himself was shot on the campaign trail, which is was an interesting omission. I would have thought she would have at least mentioned that, but it is a dangerous time we live in, for sure.
I like one thing she said that was kind of interesting. She says, the fact that harassment happens online makes it more violent, not less. Time does not exist online. In other words, you put all these things out and they just go on and continue and continue and continue. And so, somebody is not, insulated from those kind of attacks. So, that's a problem, because it's, I don't know. There's just so much violent talk going on, and so much hatred and disagreement going on that, and the American people, we have lots of guns and are very supportive of guns. So, there's the possibilities of violence are just going to get higher and worse.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a very unfortunate situation, no question about that. And we've seen generally, although not always, but the general trend has been that the right is more inclined to use violence to get its way than the left. It's not always the case, but generally it is. And we're seeing that here. It is interesting. Cottom does show some solicitude for Liz Cheney. And, again, these are people that aren't really very sympathetic to me. I don't really have a lot of sympathy for Liz Cheney whatsoever. I mean, Trump did make that comment about the gun in her face. I think he kind of shaded it a little differently. But, she was arguing throughout her career that we should be exporting violence from the United States into other countries. So, in a way, you could make the case that this is a very privileged woman, grew up with great power, and when she's had power, she's wielded it to try to use it against other people who are poor, struggling, and to kill them. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy for her. That said, I would like to see, again, Cottom, same thing. Yes, society is violent. A lot of people are angry. They're just like the people in that first article. They're angry. Their voices aren't being heard, or they feel they're not being heard. Nancy Pelosi, a woman who has like every fancy ice cream in the world in her freezer, trades stock with inside information. Yeah, people are angry. They're bitter. They have legitimate reasons to be angry. We need to create a society. We need to build one where there's a measure of fairness, and we don't have that now. Again, I would have loved to have seen that in this piece. I didn't see it.
Well, I do have to promote Liz Cheney. I think she's very very courageous, actually. She gave up her seat in Congress. She gave up all her power because she could see that Donald Trump is a crazy man. And she's about the only one, there's very few that can see that and are willing to admit it. So at least, she did her best to, on that January 6th investigation. And, she's trying to hold Trump responsible for a lot of things, but it's hurting her personally, and she's not going to have much clout in Wyoming, which is where she's from. Sure,
well, I'll give you that, Arlen. I won't argue that point. I mean, I think it did show real personal bravery and political bravery to take Trump on. I mean, she had been a pretty staunch Trumpist in his first term. I mean, she almost never voted against him. But yeah, she did. I don't think there's anything you could say bad about that. I think it was a brave thing that she did. And yeah, I respect that very much.
But of course, her father was Dick Cheney, is one of the worst human beings that, and politicians that this country has ever had, and got us into the Iraq War, which was a total waste. So yeah, her whole career has been, unfortunately, conservative to the right, pro, corporate and all that kind of thing. But the fact that she realized that Trump is a danger to the country, she deserves credit for talking about it.
100%. No argument. All right, one more piece, Arlen. We've actually got about 15 minutes left, so we may get two more in. We're going right through our articles. Another Arlen special. And you know what I didn't check? Do you have anything up on the bigpicturereport.com? I guess I should. That's where Arlen blogs. It is in our description of the program, so you can always check out his latest links there, thebigpicturereport.com. I'm going to look it up, but yeah, so here you have Bernie and Elizabeth Warren expose how GOP budget bill helps the wealthy and hurts poor people. Duh. I mean, but I'm glad. But yeah, no, this is what I think Democrats need to focus on. They want to win elections. Tell the American people, this is what the Republicans are doing to you. This is what we will do to make life better for you.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to point out that this big, beautiful budget bill is a boon for rich people. They're going to, I think it was the top 0.2% are going to get $356 billion from this bill, while those who don't have much are going to get their Medicaid cut, their food stamps cut. So it's very one-sided. It's very pro-wealthy, very pro-billionaire. And, people have to know that it's not a big, beautiful bill. It's actually a horrible bill. So, there are a few Democrats trying to point that out. I think Bernie's doing a good job. OAC is doing a good job. But they should all be talking the same way.
All right. You wanted to talk about this piece as well. And I don't have the author of it. I should, but I don't. We've reached rainbow capitalism's end. So the rainbow, of course, the symbol of the LGBTQI. Is there an I in there? I'm not sure. A plus. There's so many different letters now, as the A, B, C, D through Z, whatever it is. According to this author, we've reached that rainbow capitalism's end, and they're not that upset about it. Tell us what this piece means to you, Arlen.
The author is Aaron Hicklin, and he's editor-in-chief of Out Magazine, which, of course, is a gay pride magazine. And he's talking about how, for many years, the corporations were very happy to make money off of LGBTQ people and their causes. And, all the big corporations, were giving money to help the pride movement. But now that Trump has changed the the talk and the discourse. Now they're withdrawing all of it. They don't want anything to do with gay pride. So it just shows you, that the corporations are only interested in money, not in actual issues.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're amoral creatures, and this is from the piece, Arlen, where he's describing the phenomenon that there's less and less corporate sponsorship, and he says what makes us retreat, in other words, the retreat from funding pride, so revealing, it reminds him that acceptance, in other words, acceptance of the gay movement, acceptance of the rainbow movement, was always provisional, that at any time people could turn against gays, trans, etc. And I want to just say that is so true. This is true for every single minority group. This is true for every group. I don't care what you are. You can be accepted today and tomorrow. This is what Jewish people always say is, we're okay today, but tomorrow we could be victims. And Jews use that fact because it is a fact, right? Sometimes in the Middle Ages, you'd have a king who was was a pro-Jewish and a Semite or whatever the right philo-Semite, I guess is the term. I don't even know. They like Jews, and they were welcomed in the court. And then the next king could be a horrible, virulent race-baiting Jew hater. So it's true. Acceptance is always provisional, and that's why I say not that we should support Israel, but that's why people in every minority group have to focus so hard, fight so hard to make sure that everyone has enough. I'm always going to go there, Arlen, every single time. Everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, you have enough and no one has too much. When you greatly reduce wealth and income inequality, when everyone feels like they have a stake in society, nobody has an inordinate amount. Society isn't perfect. You still have anger. You're still going to have resentments. There's still going to be petty jealousies, but they're going to be so much less powerful. Demagogues will not have the ability nearly as much as they do in today's incredibly unequal world to seize power and use it to demonize certain groups.
And there's another thing we have to think about, and that's geography. Geography makes a big difference. You could get away with a whole lot of things that in California and blue states than you can in red states. Like just yesterday, I was going down Alvarado Street in Monterey, and there was a sidewalk that they just painted that was all different colors in promoting Pride Month or whatever. So, you can get away with that in Monterey, but I wouldn't try that in, Mississippi or Alabama or many other places.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's interesting because California is about the most unequal state of all, and yet there's definitely, and New York too, are incredibly unequal, and yet there does seem to be more acceptance in general of minorities than in some other states where maybe there isn't as much inequality, but there's definitely less tolerance as well. So it's not one-to-one. That's a really good point that you raise. Just one more from this piece I threw. That's just various former Pride sponsors now are sponsoring like the MAGA military parade. So they don't have any conviction at all. It's just how can I maximize profit?
You know what it reminds me of when after January 6th happened and all the riots in Washington, D.C., the corporations were saying, we are not going to support anybody or give money to anybody that says that the 2020 election was rigged. And they all retreated. They all came back and they all supported the MAGA politicians that, agreed with Trump and, said that the election may have been stolen. And so, yeah, that's the way corporations are. They say the nice things, they say the right things, but then, a little time passes and they lose some money and they change completely.
Arlen, we actually have gone through the stories that you recommended a little more rapidly than I thought. It's fortunate that I had yet another story queued up just in case. And I think it's very timely because of how hot it is, as you mentioned, in so many different parts of the country, although not there in beautiful Monterey, but in so many other places. So this is from, I believe the author's name is Carl Pope, I believe, although I don't have it there. He was a former Sierra Club chair. Oh, I'm hearing some back. I think I'm getting some back from you. There we go. Let me turn that down. He was the chair of the Sierra Club, and he's acknowledging one error. His big error, Arlen, according to him, is that he didn't, and the Sierra Club didn't recognize just how bad methane emissions are. Their focus has tended to be on CO2, which is every time you burn any kind of carbon, you get CO2, carbon plus O2, oxygen is CO2. But the methane gas is also an energy. It's a byproduct often of the refining process, and it is a very, very potent greenhouse gas. So he decries the failure of the Sierra Club to center the harm caused by methane gas.
Well, I didn't read that particular article.
Oh, Arlen, I lost you. Wait, hold on a sec. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't read that particular article, but obviously things change scientifically all the time, and we learn new things, and there's new research done. And hopefully, if they find out that methane is, really dangerous, that they can, start talking about it and do something about it. But it's always, it's always changing, and we have to keep up with it.
Well, the theory has been that methane, yes, it is potent. In other words, that when it enters the atmosphere, it generates quite a significant greenhouse gas effect. In other words, letting the radiation from the sun come into the atmosphere, but also holding it here so that it doesn't escape back out. And it's more potent than carbon dioxide. But it also, the methane gas tends to dissipate relatively quickly. So its impact is less lasting than the CO2, which I believe is hundreds of years. So that the added CO2 is going to stay in our atmosphere for hundreds of years. So I think that was the rationale, but they didn't recognize just how much methane there was out there and how dangerous it would be. 20 to 30% now is the percentage of the increase in temperatures, which is significant, that they attribute to methane.
Well, I'll guarantee you one thing, Hal. That's a problem that's not going to be even tackled at all in the Trump administration. So,
yeah. Well, we talked about this. In fact, he makes that point too. Carl Pope does, that neither party is taking on the climate catastrophe. It was certainly not part of the Harris campaign in any way. But there you see 30% of the current rise in global temperatures back in 2022 was attributed by the International Energy Administration. I don't know what agency, International Energy Agency. That's what IEA stands for. 30%. So very, very significant impacts. And let me just get to his solution, because I always want to tax all fuels. I would certainly tax methane. But Pope's suggestion is that states like Colorado and California should actually pay ExxonMobil and other oil companies not to emit methane.
Yeah, you've been talking about that for a long time, and using taxes and tax breaks to make a difference in climate. So there are ways to do it. But when you talk about scientific facts and scientific changes, I can't help thinking about Bobby Kennedy Jr. and what he's doing at the health cabinet post, where he's taking off people who believe in vaccination, and he's nominating people who think more like he does. And what's going to happen to measles and all these other diseases that need vaccination and that have helped and shown scientifically that they help keep those things under control. But who knows what's going to happen in the near future about a lot of different.
I think we've already seen at least an increase in some deaths as a result of a reduction in the percentage of kids who are vaccinated from certain childhood diseases like measles.
Yeah, it's there's going to be more. There's going to be another probably COVID-like disease that's going to come along, and I hope we have the intelligence and the opportunity to tackle it effectively.
Do you think, I mean, since we're talking this, well, let me just finish with the Pope article. So there you go. He is saying, the former Sierra Club CEO, or whatever his title is, I don't know, president, that he says states like New York, Illinois, Colorado, where he chose those, Colorado and California, need to pay the oil industry to aggressively clean up methane leaks. So he's not talking about using tax policy. He's saying that the governments themselves should actually pay these polluters. And I actually have a pretty significant problem with that. I do think we need to solve the problem. And yes, if it's going to help, maybe you have to bite your tongue. But it doesn't feel right, does it? They created the problem, and now we're paying them to clean up their own mess.
They've gotten all the breaks all the time, with taxes and laws, and they just they have so much power because they have so much money that no one is willing to take them on. So I hope eventually some people will.
Arlen, I know you don't like talking too far into the future. You've recoiled against my request that you identify a potential presidential nominee for the Democratic Party in 3+ years. But let me ask you, well, it wouldn't be 3. 3 years. Have you thought at all, and I asked you this a few weeks ago, but again, I'm curious, have you been thinking at all about the governor's race next year in California?
Not too much, because we don't know for sure whether Kamala Harris is going to jump in or not. And I think that'll affect a lot of the people that are running. So until she makes a decision on that, we'll just have to wait and see.
So that's very interesting what you just said. Now, I know she hasn't made a decision, but it's interesting that I guess someone like a Katie Porter would perhaps not even run if Harris announces that she's going to run. And I'm curious about that. Why would that be? Why is Harris such a big name that she would automatically defeat Katie Porter?
Yeah, I think so, because I don't think Democrats are as condemning of Kamala Harris as like you are, and certain progressives. I think generally she probably has a pretty good popularity in California, and certainly has a lot of strength and people behind her. So certainly she would be the front runner and the favorite. And if she decides to go in, she might also be thinking about running for president at a future point in 2028. So we'll just have to wait and see about that. But yeah, people like Katie Porter and other progressives would also certainly be great governors. And I hope, if possible, I'd love to see Katie Porter as our governor.
I just don't understand this deference to Harris. It makes no sense. I understand what you're saying. I understand that you're saying that a lot of Californians don't view Harris with nearly as much antipathy as I do. But the fact is, when she was running for president, she was behind Andrew Yang in the polling for the presidential primary. She wasn't going to win her own state. She wasn't going to come close. She didn't even have double-digit support in that primary. I just don't see her as some kind of an intimidating politician who's going to defeat all comers. She's not a Willie Brown. She's not a Schwarzenegger. She's not even a Gavin Newsom, as far as I can tell. She's a pretty weak campaigner. She doesn't have any real record to stand on. I don't see that Katie Porter wouldn't be able to beat her. I think Katie Porter would have a real good shot to beat her.
Well, I think you're not giving enough credit for Kamala. I think she actually, in many ways, ran a good campaign in contrast to what Trump was doing. She made people excited, and she talked a lot of positivity. And but yeah, as far as the views that she took and the policies that she endorsed, she messed up. She listened to the wrong people. She was too supportive of Biden's candidacy. Didn't want to hurt him or disrespect him. So she never really had a chance to do what maybe she could really do. And Yeah, we don't have a record of what her accomplishments really are, because being vice president doesn't give you any power at all. It just, under Joe Biden, she just has to agree with him.
Arlen, well, let me ask it to you this way. I understand you don't have the same negative view of Harris as I do, but wouldn't you want, as a Democrat, a spirited primary fight where there are several Democrats with perhaps contrasting visions for the state who are all competing for votes?
Yeah, well, I'd like to see a good governor in California. Obviously, we're the biggest state, and the governor has a lot of clout. And I think Gavin Newsom's certainly going to take the clout that he had and take it to the national stage. So it's a very important post, governor of California, and I think she would be fine. I think Katie Porter would be fine. A lot of Democrats would be fine. But yeah, we'll just have to see how that's going to go.
All right, according to CaliforniaGlobe.com, I was just doing a little scrolling. It appears that Harris is now leaning toward running for governor. And I think at least polling suggests, as you said, she would be a pretty strong front runner, maybe not with more than half the support of all voters, of all Democrats at this time, but close to it, which to my way of thinking is quite extraordinary. I don't get that. It doesn't, there's just nothing about her that I see as in any way attractive or appealing for as a governor, as a gubernatorial candidate. But I guess that's just me.
Yeah, well, you've often expressed that, and I understand that. But I think Kamala Harris would be smart if she did run for governor of California, because if she tried to run nationally for president, that's very risky. But I think if she ran for governor, she would have to be the favorite and would have a lot of advantages and probably could easily win that election.
Well, what if she lost? It would look really bad.
Well, who's going to beat her? You know, it's certainly not a Republican. There's not enough Republicans in California. So it'd have to be another Democrat. There's no big name Democrats, really, other than
Well, I would hope you would jump on the Butch Ware Green Party candidate bandwagon, Arlen. We'll certainly be promoting that here. And since we don't have to worry about a Republican winning, then clearly we can feel free to vote for Ware without worrying about helping the worser of two evils.
Well, I'd like to have a chance to vote for him if he has a chance, but I don't know if he would really have a chance in this kind of a, political climate that we're in now, where, what corporations support you? How much money do you have to run? There's so many of these kind of factors that Kamala would have an advantage over somebody who's running for the Green Party.
Well, she would have those advantages, which to my way of thinking would be major disadvantages when it comes to governing in a pro-people, pro-life, pro-peace way. But that's just me, pro-environment way.
I don't know exactly what kind of position she would take on a lot of things. Like I say, she's been vice president for a long time, and so she's never really had a chance to talk about the, what she really believes in and what her positions are, independent of Biden. So I'd like to see what she has to say.
All right, Arlen, you always get the last word when you're on. So anything else to add before we move on to tomorrow for me and to next week for you?
Well, I'm certainly interested in seeing what's going on in the news right now. Hour by hour, things are changing, and if Israel reacts in a bad way, or there's just so many things that are going on right now, and Trump seems kind of, in my opinion, seems a little bit shaky. So I just want to see what's going to happen the rest of the day, and how the world thinks about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's always great to have Arlen on Halitics. I'll be back tomorrow. Everybody else, have a great day.